Peace and welcome to The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Folks, we got a great show lined up for you. First and foremost, let's talk about the latest with the Ukraine and Russia conflict. The president has put out an official op-ed in the New York Times stating what his intention and his administration's intentions are in Ukraine. Question is, does this align with the interests of the American people? We'll talk to Dr. Gerald Horne to get the latest. Also, let's talk a little bit about what's happening with Robb Elementary. This is the school where the Uvalde, Texas massacre took place. The question is, should Robb Elementary be razed and rebuilt? We will have that conversation. And then later on, let's talk about the International African American Museum that's going to be opening up. When? Well, tune in for the big announcement about that. And then later, we'll talk about D.L. Hughley and Monique and some other trending topics. So stay with us. It's a lot coming at you on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Are you ready? I'm ready. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome to the show. Welcome. Man, if you're on the East Coast, you're probably experiencing some heat. My goodness, it's hot. But this is the kickoff. We're getting closer to the official beginning of summer, but it is a hot one today. But folks, thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversations. And of course, for every conversation that we have, we highly encourage that you post your comments in our Facebook or YouTube chat. That way we can include your thoughts into the discussion. It is very, very important that we do that. So we would love to hear what you have to say on all of these dynamic conversations that we got planned for you today. Now, to start us off, let's talk about the latest in the Ukraine and Russia conflict. I mean, this whole conflict has now expanded to include not just countries in the European Union, but also to include countries within the NATO alliance. And here to talk a little bit about the latest situation, as President Biden has put out an official op-ed in the New York Times, where he lays out what his plans are, what America will and will not do in Ukraine. We'll share with you a little bit of what the president had to say. Then we break it down with Dr. Gerald Horne, our analyst here, to give us some understanding about foreign policy and the impact of that as he's representing the University of Houston. And we're also joined by Culture crew member Sinedu Wakofor to talk to us a little bit about the implications on the home front. So let me just share with you first and foremost, folks, what the president had to say as he laid out the case as to why America is backing Ukraine so strongly. Now, if you hadn't had a chance to read it, you can definitely check it out. It's on the New York Times website. But I do want to just point out a couple of things. Here's one of the big takeaways from the president. Check this out. He said, we will continue cooperating with our allies and partners on Russian sanctions, the toughest ever imposed on a major economy. We will continue providing Ukraine with advanced weaponry, including Javelin anti-tank missiles, Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, powerful artillery and precision rocket systems, radars, unmanned aerial vehicles, Mi-17 helicopters, and ammunition. He also said that his administration will also send billions more in financial assistance as authorized by Congress. We will work with our allies and partners to address the global food crisis that Russia's aggression is worsening. And we will help our European allies and others reduce their dependence on Russian fossil fuels and speed our transition to a clean energy future. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that first. Then I'm going to share with you another part of what the president had to say in his op-ed. But let's welcome now Dr. Gerald Horne, who is the professor of African American Studies, and he is our man around for foreign policy representing the University of Houston. Dr. Horne, thank you, sir. As always, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. How are you this afternoon?
Hey, it's all good. What about you?
I'm good, Doc. I'm good. So, okay, check this out, Doc. You know, I gotta point out like some of the obvious things about how we're moving forward with this situation. And tell me if I'm wrong. I might be way off base. I don't remember a president laying out his foreign policy goals in an op-ed versus a television appearance. Are we seeing something different here? Is this something noteworthy to just keep in mind and say, wait a minute, why didn't he just say this in a national from the Oval Office or from some other space? Why did he put this out in the op-ed? Is that something that we need to worry about in terms of the communication to the American people?
Not necessarily worry about the form, but certainly worry about the content. That is to say that Mr. Biden in that op-ed that you referenced did have the intelligence to walk back the point he made in an offhand manner a few weeks ago when he suggested that he was seeking regime change in Moscow. It's quite positive that he says that is not part of the agenda. And
right.
Also, he tends to dilute what his Pentagon chief Lloyd Austin had said a few weeks ago when he said a purpose of the U.S. mission in Ukraine was to weaken Russia. He tends to amend that as well. But the problem with the op-ed is what he says as much as what he does not say. What he says is that he's sending heavier weaponry to Ukraine. Right. And this has been denounced in Moscow. Moscow says it's throwing fuel on the flames. Mr. Biden and Secretary of State Blinken argue that they have received a promise from Mr. Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine, not to use this heavy weaponry to attack Russia, even though it's quite capable of doing so. I don't think that that promise is worth the paper it's probably not written. And then the point that you read concerning the so-called green future, with this boycott of Russian oil, taking Russian oil off the market after already sanctioning another oil producer, speaking of Venezuela, another oil producer, speaking of Iran, what Mr. Biden has managed to do is, number one, drive up the price of a barrel of petroleum, which I must say is being celebrated here in Houston, the Petro Metro. But on the other hand, I understand that in downtown Los Angeles, as we speak, you can buy a gallon of unleaded gasoline for over $8. There are certain analysts who say that $8 is not the limit. It may go up to $10 or more.
It's
like a wage cut for many in our constituency. And Mr. Biden has no answer for it, except that rather weak meeting he had yesterday in the Oval Office with the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jay Powell, where he began the meeting by saying, I don't believe in interference in the mission of the Fed. Well, then why is he having this meeting? It was just a photo op. So Mr. Biden has deepened the quagmire into which he is sinking. And I'm afraid to say the quagmire into which we are all sinking at his behest.
Wow. So if we're all sinking here, like I want to go back to the point that you made there, first and foremost, in terms of the weaponry that's being provided by the United States to Ukraine. I would think that is, in the Kremlin's eyes, a form of aggression, right? I mean, to know exactly the type of artillery, that's exactly the type of military equipment that the U.S. is providing to the Ukraine. You know, it seems to me that Russia is going to not take this announcement lightly. They're going to prepare for it, and probably will start to move differently as a result of it. I'm concerned that may escalate things because Russia has already been talking about the further that the United States gets in support of Ukraine, the more severe their attacks will be. That's my concern.
That's obviously a legitimate concern. And what has occurred to you also has occurred to the leaders of France and Germany. If you look at the Wall Street Journal this morning, on the front page is an article about the increasing nervousness in Paris and Berlin about where the United States is leading the North Atlantic Alliance. Initially, we had thought that the plan of Washington was to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. Increasingly in Paris and Berlin, the idea is that Washington is seeking to bankrupt France and Germany. That is to say, recall that the sacked National Security Advisor under Mr. Trump, speaking of John Bolton, said that the 45th US president saw the European Union as second only to China as an antagonist to the United States of America. And so Paris and Berlin are approaching Washington with a great deal of skepticism. They see that their budgets are being strained, not only because they're sending advanced weaponry into Ukraine, denuding their stocks, but also their capitals and their outlying areas are being deluged with refugees from Ukraine, unlike refugees from Africa or Syria. They're being given red carpet treatment. They're being allowed social welfare benefits from the moment they lay a foot on French and German territory. This is happening in France in the run-up to parliamentary elections, where it's expected that the party of President Macron won't necessarily do as well as it did when he was reelected just a few weeks ago. So he has to be concerned as well. So at the same time that Mr. Biden is enraging and infuriating Moscow, he's making the so-called allies in Berlin and Paris ever more nervous. The only question is, how long will this alliance be able to withstand the strain and the pressure?
Right. One more thing, and then I want to bring in our culture crew member, Sinedu. Dr. Horn, talk to us about the impact, the economic impact of this. The CEO of JP Morgan had warned investors that they better, how did he put it? Brace themselves for an economic hurricane caused by the Fed and by this war. Now, one of the things that the president did not say in his op-ed is that this military equipment, along with extra money for Ukraine, is part of a $700 million military aids package. So talk to us about the economic impact of this. As we it was revealed that Janet Yellen from the Fed said that she got it wrong about inflation, that it was much more severe than what the Fed had expected. And now we're talking about sending more money, again, the president said not going to send troops, but he's going to send more money over. What does that mean to the essential commodities of food, oil, and other essential needs affecting us here on the domestic front? How will that be affected?
Well, we've already made reference to the price of gasoline at the pump, which is heading north of $8. With regard to food, you may have heard that the leader of Senegal in West Africa, Macky Sall, as well as leaders throughout the continent, have warned that the war in Ukraine is having a negative impact on food supplies, insofar as Ukraine historically has been a breadbasket for the planet, shipping wheat to Egypt in particular. The saying goes that if the price of a loaf of bread goes up, then off goes the head of a leader. So this could lead to political and economic instability. I think that Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase is onto something when he suggests that Ukraine is having a negative impact on prices, on inflation. You may have seen the news reports about inflation going through the roof in Europe. We already know about what's happening in this country with regard to not only inflation in terms of food, where some are suggesting that the price of a loaf of bread may also go up to about $10 a loaf, believe it or not. At the same time, we're being hit by the supply chain snarls, which is an outgrowth of the war, which has led to a reduction in baby formula, which caused the United States to have to fly in jumbo jets full of baby formula from Europe. So I would urge Mr. Biden, and I would also urge Democratic Party leaders who have been voting with rare unanimity in favor of these multi-billion-dollar aid packages to reconsider and rethink. Because ultimately, I think one of the most dangerous aspects of this entire crisis is that conservatives have managed to adopt, at least some of them, an anti-war position. Look at the op-ed by Christopher Caldwell in the New York Times today, a noted conservative, which raises searching questions that you rarely hear in the mass media unless you tune in on a regular basis to the culture with Farajii Muhammad. And that particular development does not bode well for the Democrats in the midterm elections in November, when prosperity is going down the drain and peace is also going down the drain, while you have conservatives posing as doves. That is not a pretty picture.
Not a pretty picture at all. All right, I want to bring in culture crew member Shanadu, who is a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist, to talk to us a little bit about some of the ways that this whole situation in Ukraine is impacting us, the way we work, the way we move around in this country, and to pose any questions that he may have for Dr. Horne. Shanadu, it's always good to have you, brother. Welcome back.
It's good to be here, Dr. Horne. I appreciate even the vast amount of details that you gave to this situation, this kerfuffle, for lack of better words, that we're in. And I say we're is because it's being felt on different fronts. I was just reading earlier that in Ghana, that they are ramping up local producers of fertilizers simply because they no longer can get fertilizers from Ukraine. And with what you said about gas at the pump and us currently being in inflation, it's interesting that something that we were not interested in getting involved in is now involving every part of American and global societies. And I think where I'm at, and where many folks, everyday folks who may not know the details of all that is going on, is how much longer can this continue? How worse can this get? Because we're in a space where the United States said at the very beginning that we will not, send troops on the ground, yada, yada, yada. But as we start to advance, the M77s that we're sending, or all the other heavy artilleries that we're sending, Russia is now saying that, the more that we send is the more provocation that's being added to the war. So what is going to take place? What happens if Russia then decides to upgrade its efforts? What does that mean to the everyday American?
That's a great point.
Well, I'm afraid to say that the prognosis is not very positive right now. With regard to U.S. boots on the ground, you might have seen the story a few days ago that suggested that the United States was sending more military men to Kiev, supposedly to just guard the embassy there. But if you're a student of war, in particular the war in Vietnam and the war in Indochina, you'll know that the U.S. deepening involvement oftentimes began with sending troops to guard the embassy. And then you need troops to guard the troops that guard the embassy, and so on, until before long, you have a major troop deployment against a nuclear power, speaking of Russia. Where could this crisis end? Well, it's difficult to say, but right now, with the rhetoric heating up on both sides, and Mr. Biden's unmatched ability to state gaffes, that is to say, United States will intervene militarily to fight China over Taiwan, that Mr. Putin is a war criminal who deserves to be ousted, although he walked that back in the New York Times op-ed. Let's hope that his staff is as adroit as they have been in terms of cleaning up his statements, because Mr. Biden can have us all stumble into a conflagration that is too ghastly to contemplate.
Wow. That's the real concern there. Let's go get some comments from our watchers. Folks, post your comments on YouTube and Facebook, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Let's go to Janelle Fields, who said, and I like this one because Dr. Horne, folks always appreciate your candor when you get on the show. But she said, Dr. Horne always gives it to us without filter. Biden's decision to go print versus prime time or news conference is a lazy communications department move. Leaks indicate he expects others to pump him up. A lazy office, communications office department move. Wow. I thought it was a little different too, Janelle, to be honest with you. I'm going to be honest. I mean, I read the op-ed. I thought it was different, but it is interesting. But I appreciate that. And we'll see if a lot of Americans will read the op-ed as much as you put it in the New York Times on the websites and all of those things. How many people will actually read it is going to be a whole different story. Antonio Hobson. Antonio said the U.S. has 20 to 30 years in oil supply. Why not use it now? So, Dr. Horn, can you break that down to us?
Well, the United States, like other major countries, maintains a so-called strategic reserve of petroleum. The problem about using it now is suppose you have another crisis next year. Then you'll be empty in terms of going to that strategic reserve. And back to the op-ed, I think that one of the reasons why it was put in writing is that it allows perhaps his newly installed press secretary or his chief of staff, Ron Klain, to do the writing, and Mr. Biden is not involved, because if he speaks to a national audience, suppose the teleprompter stops working, then he has to, you know, we could end up with World War III. So wow. The previous commenter suggested that it was a lazy communication strategy, and there's something to that, but perhaps we were blessed and did not realize it.
Wow, there it is. All right, let's go to Damon. Damon Blissett. Damon's a loyal watcher of Black Star Network. Damon, we always appreciate your support. Damon said, these gas prices are crazy. I'm glad I'm working from home. Yeah, I understand, Damon. And based upon what we've heard from Dr. Horn today, Damon, it doesn't look like they're going to get any better anytime soon, especially on the West Coast. Woo! They're taking a hard hit over there. Taylor, Damon, thank you so much for your comment. Taylor checked in and said, look, how should or could American households be best prepared for these possibilities? It seems like, and I love this question, Taylor, thank you so much for posting it. And it seems like, Dr. Horn, that's one of the big, you know, all of these moving parts. But I feel like for us, it's here at home, the American people, we're like, well, what are we supposed to do? Just you know, grin and bear it? I mean, like how do we supposed to handle the possibility that food and oil and other commodities, necessary commodities, are skyrocketing, where folks are trying to make ends meet? They're trying to keep their cars on the road, get to work, all of these things. But how can we actually prepare for a situation like this?
It's difficult. I mean, there are collective approaches and there are individual approaches. Collective approaches. I'm speaking to you from Houston, where the janitors in downtown buildings organized by the Service Employees International Union are about to go on strike for higher wages. They need higher wages because the price of food is going up, the price of gasoline is going up. And that's the kind of collective enterprise that I think all of our constituency needs to consider. On the individual level, obviously, we need more savings. Obviously, if you're renting, if you have the wherewithal, you should consider moving out of that particular market, because the price of rents are going up. You should seek a stable housing price by saving your ducats and getting a down payment, if you can manage it, for a house or a condo before these interest rates go up, which I think Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase was hinting at. But frankly, with this ship of state heading into choppy waters, with basically an incompetent admiral at the wheel, I dare say that we're all in trouble.
All right, I want to share this, and I know we got to close out this part of the discussion, but I did want to put something else that the president had mentioned, which is a very big concern for a lot of people here in the country. He talks about nuclear war, the use of nuclear war. Let me just share this with you folks really quickly. Keenan, let's post that second quote up here. One, thank you. He said, quote, I know many people around the world are concerned about the use of nuclear weapons. We currently see no indication that Russia has intent to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine, though Russia's occasional rhetoric to rattle the nuclear saber is itself dangerous and extremely irresponsible. Let me be clear. Any use of nuclear weapons in this conflict or at any scale would be completely unacceptable to us as well as the rest of the world, and would entail severe consequences. Dr. Horn, do we believe that? Do we just say, okay, because we hear the Russian rhetoric about nuclear war. We've talked about it, of course, here on this show. Do we believe the president when he said that, like this, we don't need to jump the gun on nuclear talk?
Well, that was a very perverse sentence that you just read, because basically what Mr. Biden is saying is, folks, don't worry about the end of the world. Now, when the president says, don't worry about the end of the world, he's putting something deep and profound and heavy on the table and making us worry even more than perhaps we should be. And then you see those hedge words. We have no indication that they're currently contemplating using nuclear war, that they have a current intent to use nuclear war, to use nuclear weapons. And I don't find that reassuring at all. As a matter of fact, don't be surprised if you look out your window and see people running around with their hair on fire, because it's a highly inflammatory sentence that you just read.
We will have to see, of course, how things continue to unfold. And Dr. Horn, just know, next week we will bring you back on, dear brother. But we appreciate all of your insight and analysis, Dr. Gerald Horn, who is the Morris Professorship of History and African American Studies at the University of Houston. Thank you once again for joining us, Doc.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's talk about Robb Elementary, the school of the Uvalde, Texas massacre. The question is being asked, should Robb Elementary be razed and rebuilt? I'm going to break it down to you to tell you that in past school shootings, what they decided to do with the site of a massacre. And we're going to ask the same question for you. What do you think should be done to the school, to Robb Elementary? We'll have that conversation in the second 30 of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new, unsettling force, and we are powerful. New, unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience as we fight these interlocking injustices together.
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third Reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, as the country continues to process all that has happened in Uvalde, and the first set of funerals for the students and the adults that were killed on last week happens. So it started over the weekend. Now the question becomes, what do you do with the sight of a tragedy such as this one? And so the question has been brought to the forefront: should Robb Elementary be razed and rebuilt? I want to bring in culture crew member, Brother Shanadu, to have this conversation with me as we look at the possibility and the future of Robb Elementary. Brother Shanadu, when people are asking this question, and let me just put this out there very quickly. This is something from the Center for Violence Prevention at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. They have this to say about this idea: should Robb Elementary be razed? They said in many cases, these schools are closed or entirely renovated in an attempt to decrease the traumatic reminders that they have become for community members. Now, that is interesting for me. That is very interesting for me, because it's like, if you were to destroy a school and then rebuild it, that takes time, that takes money, and that will be a huge inconvenience to the families that now have to readjust themselves to sending them children to another. And at the same time, you do not want, as the Center for Violence Prevention say, you don't want these reminders of what has happened. How do you think the community, and how do you think we should look at this situation, Brother Shanadu?
Thank you for having me again, Brother Farajii. I think
welcome,
the center is they're right. There's a couple of problems with this issue. They're right. They're right now that the problem has taken place. Psychological safety is a huge thing after a traumatic experience has taken place. However, if we're able to do everything, because there are federal funding grants that are put aside for what happens to schools after a mass shooting and so on and so forth. And I think these are all important things, but if we're going to do everything but say the house is on fire itself, to me, all of these things become for naught, because then it's the next school and the next school. I think it's important to raise the school like they did in Sandy Hook, like they did in Columbine, for the traumatic experience. But if we're not going to stop what causes these issues, there's a statement that we say where I come from, prevention is better than cure. How are we going to stop the next one? Because if not, then this conversation will be prolonged about, what do we do afterwards? This is America.
Yeah.
They're going to just print money, not being serious, but money is going to appear, and whether we like it or not, that school is going to be rebuilt or refurbished one way or another. But the major issue here is, why does this continually happen? That's where
always. Hey, look, and I'm right there with you, and I want to pull up what Karen M had to say about this, because I think it's also important that we look at this part of it. And this is something, Brother Sinedu, that I've talked about. We talked about this yesterday, that we just don't have time for us to grieve. But Karen says, why is it necessary to have a conversation about what should be doing with the physical school, Robb Elementary now? The community members should have time to grieve and then make decisions. Well, a couple of things. One is, as a result, they were already planning to close out the school year. This was the last few weeks of school anyway. So once the massacre took place, they closed school early, obviously. But I think that Karen's point about giving people time and the space to grieve, it's like you and this has happened. This is the part of the culture. People want to move forward. People just want to move on. I mean, this school, which has hundreds of students coming into it, this school is a institution within that community. Uvalde, if you take a look at Uvalde, it's only about 16,000 people in that community, in that town. So it's a very small town. It's a close-knit town. The institution is like a elementary school is a pivotal institution. And I agree that, maybe it might be too early, but I think that for us to have this conversation, one, because it's a school and it's a center, an institutional educational center. And then two, it's hard to drive past that school and not think about the massacre. And I don't know if raising the school, in my opinion, is not just about students going back. There is something to this idea that people, the other community members, the adults, they have to look at this situation. I mean, nobody is going to be the same in Uvalde, Texas. And I think that that's part of the thing about the school. It's like a physical representation of the pain. And maybe that's why people are having this conversation right now, because they're trying to figure out the best way to process the hurt, the loss, the pain as a result of this massacre. So it's a hard thing, and I know folks are checking in. I don't think it's a hard decision. I don't think it's a premature decision. The president himself has even said that he's going to look into raising the school and rebuilding a new one. That's what he said. But what's your take on that, Brother Sinedu?
It's very simple. For one, if you think about why people are thinking so fast, you have to understand grieving. The idea that we have of grieving as people does not always play well into the capitalistic society that we live in. It's bury, continue. It's mourn, continue. It's a continuum. So although I think it's important to think about next steps, has it even been a week since this has happened? We're still fresh in it, but in my opinion, that's the way capitalist society works, is on to the next. It's
right.
Let's keep it moving. And to your point about what do we do in times like this and how to put real actionable things, I think it was September 11th, 2001, that a tragedy happened in this country. And by November 24th, 2002, the Department of Homeland Security was created. Columbine was almost 25 years ago. Until today, there has been zero actual actionable items that shows that we're putting some type of seriousness towards these mass shootings, mass casualties are being perpetrated
25 years ago
by American citizens. And it may lead someone to wonder, does it only matter when the adversary is foreign?
Yeah.
Why, when the adversary might be one of our own homebred, it's let's build this or kind of let's move it to the side. These are deeper questions, because this shooting is just one example of a deeper stain and stench that is starting to ruminate in what is it to be American. That's where I am currently.
Yeah. It's and I want to share something that Taylor posted again. Taylor said, this issue should be handled from multiple angles. The concerns are many. Let the grievers grieve while the builders build. Time waits for no man. Healing is multifaceted.
Ashe.
I can agree. You know, I mean, you just spoke about being a capitalistic society, moving on. You know what I mean? Not having the space and the time to grieve. But you got to give people space and time to grieve. And you got to let, you know, people want to see something different. They don't want to see that reminder. So you got to, it's got to be a plan that incorporates both. Folks, I just want to let you know that breaking news has just come across the wire where it was announced that the grand jury has now that was responsible for the grand jury has made an indictment against the 18-year-old Peyton Gendron. This is the shooter in the Buffalo mass shooting. He was charged by the grand jury today with domestic terrorism motivated by hate and 10 counts of first-degree murder. 10 counts. So you're talking about a count for each one of the victims that he killed. 10 counts. He's been in custody since May the 14th. Since the May the 14th shooting, he's scheduled to be arraigned tomorrow in Erie County Court. And then the 25-count indictment also contained charges of murder and attempted murder as a hate crime and weapons possession. Now, this domestic terrorism charge accuses Gendron of killing because of the perceived race and or color of his victims. So that's where that charge comes from. But again, the grand jury has indicted Peyton Gendron, the 18-year-old man who was the alleged killer in the Buffalo massacre. They have indicted him with domestic terrorism motivated by hate and 10 charges of first-degree murder. As of right now, Sinead, as we're talking about this school situation, now this news comes out. My thinking is, hey, throw the book at him. I want him to get the fullest extent of the consequences of the law. So, you know, if this is the way, if the prosecutors feel like this is the best way for them to handle Peyton Gendron, but it makes sense to me. So does it make sense to you about these charges?
It does. I hate to be that black guy, but it's good to see that the law is working and justice can be served.
You say you hate to be that black guy, huh?
I hate to be it, but it's interesting. It's very, it shouldn't be, but it's very refreshing to see the law work quickly when we are told that justice is a slow process. I just want us to never forget that, irregardless of what we saw. It's interesting to know that it can work swiftly. And I'm going to save that quote for another time in the future where I'm probably going to have to use it. I definitely think they should throw the whole book at him and all of that. But I'm going to say this again. Do you know why it doesn't matter what they do to him? And I'm going to keep saying it. Because after the shooter in Uvalde, there were 8 more shootings within 7 days. Sorry, 11. 11. Making these examples without litigating laws is for naught in this land. Because there will be another radical that will do the exact same thing. And there will be another, when you're not holding anybody accountable, the NRA still, this is the interesting thing about America. All that happened in the NRA still met. They still held their convention. If that says nothing to you about that this doesn't matter to anybody, to the people that are making the laws, because I asked myself this during Sandy Hook, I said this question that hasn't been answered. How many kids would have to be killed before anything actually happens in this country? How many? The numbers continue to vary within the decades that these things are taking places. And just common sense gun legislation. I mean, we just were screaming about a week or 2 or 3 or 4 about leaked Supreme Court memos in regards to a woman's body and how that is going to be changed, or how it was easy to boost up the age to buy tobacco. But a gun is more accessible than any, it's just so easy to get in. When it comes to gun, it's like, We're not touching it because of that Second Amendment. And I think it's important to say this. As it pertains to the U.S. Constitution, it makes me, a black man who was once 3/5 of a person, according to that same book, it makes me interested in why, A, constitutions cannot be changed or amended, or B, why do many Americans who are lawmakers think that the words of those of the Constitution is more liable than the Bible? Like, that is law. It's unchangeable. Our founding fathers cannot be wrong. They cannot be corrected, even in the time of now. That is scary to me.
Absolutely scary. Absolutely scary. And I think, the other part about the Constitution that I'm learning, Brother Shanadu, is that it can be interpreted by so many different people to fit whoever's agenda. You know what I mean? When I read that the president himself said that the Second Amendment is not is up for interpretation, and he used a different word, but essentially he made the point to saying, like, even though we're talking about guns and the right to bear arms, it's up for interpretation. Like, when do you bear arms? How, it did not go into detail what type of arms you bear. It's up for interpretation. So, when we're looking at these conversations about, fundamentalists and traditionalists and constitutionalists and all of those folks, it's like the founding fathers did not foresee. I'm sure they probably did not foresee that the way America is in modern day 2022, they had that in mind. It's hard for me to believe that they probably saw maybe 10, 15, 20 years down the road, but they didn't foresee that we were going to be this superpower, right? And at the same time of being a superpower, also being an experiment. So we have this confidence, we have this bravado, we have this idea of exceptionalism, but then on the other hand, we have this vulnerability, we have this view that that we're still evolving, we're still making progress. I'm sure they didn't foresee that duality existing in the same space at the same time. I'm sure they didn't. So have. When we look at the Constitution, yes, excuse me, it outlines certain things, but it's not finite. It's not finite.
Farajii, they couldn't have seen it because that's the whole point of evolution. We're supposed to evolve not just in body, but in thought, and spirit, and mind. And when you think about, I'm blessed that since I was a baby, I was able to travel back to my motherland, Nigeria. I have been in villages and areas that have never seen constant electricity, running water, or indoor plumbing. I have been in areas that are high-level crime areas that have been that way forever, that are dangerous. And I say to myself, when I think about, living in America, in a land of electricity, in a land of law, in a land of police and precincts, who of the two examples at my listing should be bearing arms? I always ask myself, what is it that makes this great land, the land of opportunity, what makes us in such a defense mode at all time, every time? And it's not just guns. It'd be one thing if it was a handgun, but an AR-15 is a gun of war. And the thing is, these criminals use the exact same gun every time, every single time. And yep. I forget who says this, but someone once, I think Dave Chappelle had repeated it and said, if you want to see gun law changes, every Black person should register for a gun, and you'll get that.
Wow. Change. I have heard that myself, brother. I definitely heard that myself. And Janelle, she got me on point, Shanadu. She said, she gave me that quote directly from the president where he said the Second Amendment is not absolute. So Janelle, thank you so much for keeping me on point with that. I love you guys for doing that for me. But yes, the president said the Second Amendment is not absolute. It's up for interpretation. It's up for interpretation. Let me get some more comments in here as we have this discussion, Brother Sinead, very quickly. Let's go to Brother King Lee. Brother King Lee posted a comment. He said, yes, too bad that New York doesn't have the death penalty. That punk needs to be hung high. Talking about Peyton Gendron, who was just indicted with these domestic terrorism hate charges and 10 counts of first-degree murder. In the state of New York, the death penalty has been abolished, so it does not apply in that state. DeAndre said, little do people know there was another individual who made threats akin to the Buffalo shooter near the same area shortly after that demon committed acts of terrorism. The law got to him in advance. And this goes back to the point that you made, Sinead. It's the mentality. It's the mentality. You want to know why from 1999 when Columbine happened to 2022 that Robb Elementary can happen, or that the Tops massacre can happen? We haven't changed our mentality. We really haven't changed anything. We've actually become a more violent society since 1999. More violent. So DeAndre, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Dejima Boutique checked in and said the so-called originalist, textualist, original intent people are driven by money from gun manufacturers and nothing else. B Dizzle, he checked in and said the Constitution needs to be updated. Hell yes. Hey Dizzle, excuse me. I'm not sure why on all of this modern time we haven't had a very real push to update the Constitution. I mean, we're still, you mentioned it, Sinead, we're still 3/5 of a human being according to that document. 3/5. In 2022, it's like just as much as we have this talk about reparation, we should really have a conversation about updating that, changing the math, because that math ain't mathing. We're still 3/5 human beings. Best Way Possible checked in and said the Second Amendment argument is just a prop to support white supremacy.
There you go.
Man. And McCole checked in. McCole, a lawyer watcher, she said guns equal power and authority in the U.S. That is why I believe there is a great resistance against gun laws. Absolutely. America, you know what I mean? It's like the whole you live by the gun, die by the gun mentality. That's America. And then Sonia checked in and said, Farajii, it's good to see that he was indicted, but recent history has shown that being indicted doesn't mean being found guilty and doing prison time, i.e. Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yep. Who to my point, Farajii, that I made earlier about the NRA having a convention.
Yeah.
He spoke at their convention. Was it not last year or 2 years ago when the situation? We have to be really careful on what
he spoke at this year's convention?
It wasn't this year. It was the year he was acquitted. He spoke at that convention that year.
So that must have been last year. It must have been last year.
Yeah. You got to be careful, man.
Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I know we're running out of time. And I always want to get an opportunity to say this very important point. I always ask myself in these moments when these crazy white folks are doing what crazy white folks have done for millennia, think about every Black human who in some way during the civil rights movement participated in nonviolent movements, who got bit by dogs, who got chased down, hosed down, all that and the third. Think about Rudy Bridges. Never committed one mass shooting or atrocity of that nature. And I bring that up because they're trying to now manipulate the story into speaking about, as it pertains to the gentleman from Buffalo, mental health or what have you. And I ask myself these questions. If anybody, if that justification that the gentleman was getting picked on and so on and so forth, then wouldn't every black person or every foreign person or every brown person or every gay person or anybody who's different from being a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male, shouldn't they have done something?
Yeah.
Something's just not adding up, Farajii.
No. And you know what? The reality is, I think this country, as we close up this part of the conversation, I think this country is in, a fertile space to make some fundamental changes. I'm going to say that again. We are in a fertile space to make fundamental changes. We don't have to keep moving forward the way we're moving forward. Look, if there is a real conversation about reparation, there can be a real conversation about guns in this country, right? If there's a real conversation about the impact of white supremacy as a philosophy and ideology, then we can certainly have a real conversation about the Constitution and updating it. If there's a real conversation about people and how they identify themselves, gender identification, diversity, equity, and all of these other issues, then we can have a very real conversation about changing how this government governs in modern day 21st century America. We can do it. We can do it. And it's crazy that in this modern 21st century government, Brother Shanadu, people still want to act as if we're back in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. You know what I'm saying? They want to still approach 21st century problems with 20th century tools and or solutions. Like, you can't deal with the gun issue the same way that Reagan dealt with the gun issue. Can't deal with the drug issue the same way that George Bush Sr. dealt with the drug issue. You know what I mean? Like, you have to, because obviously those things either didn't work or they just simply added to the problem. And we have to think innovative at this point. And I'm going to go back to the jewel that you dropped earlier today, Shanadu. We're in a capitalistic society. And as a result of that capitalism, we don't see human life as we should see it. And as a result of being in a capitalistic system, the almighty dollar is still more valuable than the lives of children, the lives of adults and seniors. It's always that. So that's the space that we are in as a capitalistic society. Brother Shanadu, always a pleasure to talk to you, brother. Thank you so much for joining us for this first hour today.
Thank you so much for having me, brother.
Absolutely, absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, we're going to check in with Dr. Henson of the International African American Museum, who has a major announcement that they want to share with us. We're going to get the exclusive announcement right here on The Culture. So stay with us. That's going to be happening in the next hour. And of course, we got some trending topics and so much more. So stay with us. You tune into The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome to the second hour of the culture right here on the Black Star Network, folks. Very, very excited about the conversations that we already have. If you missed them, obviously, I want you to check them out. We talked to Dr. Gerald Horne from the University of Houston, talking about the implications of President Biden's op-ed. And we also checked in and talked to culture crew member, Brother Shanadu, to talk about this idea of raising Robb Elementary, but also the big breaking news that is coming out of Buffalo, out of the state of New York, is that the grand jury has charged the shooter in the Buffalo massacre, Peyton Gendron, with domestic terrorism based upon hate and 10 counts of first-degree murder. Of course, we will certainly keep you updated about that. And, of course, make sure y'all tune in to Brother Roland's show, Big Brother Roland Martin Unfiltered, who is going to certainly break it down, what those charges mean, and more importantly, how does this recent situation in Buffalo, will it change the conversation about Black folks, terrorism, and mass shootings in this country? So highly advise you to to tune into him. But I wanted to, speaking of changing the conversation, I wanted to have a discussion about a major announcement that is coming out of the great state of Charleston, of South Carolina, in Charleston, where if you remember, folks, we had a discussion with Dr. Tanya Matthews about the International African American Museum. And Keenan, let's show a little bit of that video. Y'all remember the conversation I had with Dr. Matthews, right? We talked a little bit about what this museum, here it is. Take a look at this. Take a look at this. Oh my gosh, 150,000 square feet of exhibition, learning, and interpretive space. 9 exhibition galleries range in theme from introducing the African origins and, of course, the diasporic connections of Black people to revealing centuries of African-American economics, creativity, and social contributions of American history, to taking an unvarnished look at slavery and the enslaved people's fight for human dignity. Look at this museum, folks. Man, oh man, this is going to be a beautiful site right there on Gadsden's Wharf. This is an historical space right there. This is the former site of Gadsden's Wharf. It's one of the nation's most prolific slave trading ports, where the International African American Museum will be situated. And so I want to bring back on, yes, look at all of those folks enjoying the museum and enjoying this. This is the stuff we're going to be looking forward to. So I don't want to delay the announcement anymore. I want to bring back on the CEO herself, who is going to break it down for us, share with us all that we got to know about the International African American Museum. Dr. Tanya Matthews, thank you so much for joining us, President, CEO. What's the big announcement, Doc?
Listen, hey, Brother Farajii, you have the bomb digital walkthrough of the museum. Just want to make sure that you know that. And so you said you would bring me back, and I
did.
And so I do have news for you. When last we talked, we did not know when we were opening, but now I do. So it's going to be January 2023. January 20th kicks off opening weekend. That's at the tail end of MLK week. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute. Hold up, Doc.
Listen, don't put me on pause while you get your plane tickets. You got to do the email. You got to do the conversation first. Don't start booking flights yet. Just get the people 10 minutes. Just give the people 10 minutes to get ahead of you in line on that. Yes.
Wait a minute. So the museum is going to open on the tail end of Martin Luther King Day weekend of 2023, January 20th, January 21st.
Yes.
Folks
so
are
MLK
going to
Day is that Monday, and then we open the following Friday. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is major. That is major.
Listen, that's major. And like so many conversations you've always had, it's because I'm big on not giving folks an excuse to celebrate just one day, right? While it may seem poetic to open up like on MLK weekend, you know, I don't want folks to think that it's just one weekend when you stick in all the African American, all the Black stuff that you can. We just fit all the culture in 72 hours, right?
Right.
With Black History Month, right? So we're coming out of MLK weekend, rolling into February to really emphasize, you know, this is a 365-day journey, especially with all the stories that we have to tell.
All right, Doc, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to take a quick break because I want to make sure your audio is clear because it's coming across a little choppy.
Bubbling going on there.
Like some bubbling is happening. So we want to get that cleared up. Okay. And then when we come back, let's have more of this conversation. And folks, you heard the big announcement. The International African American Museum will be opening up at the tail end of MLK Day, MLK weekend in January of 2023. Big announcement. Very, very significant. We'll break down the details and talk a little bit more about it with Dr. Tanya Matthews. So stay with us, folks. You're tuned into The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful. A new unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up. And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk, and we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience. As we fight these interlocking injustices together.
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.
Hi, Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. We're just getting into the conversation with the CEO and president of the International African American Museum, Dr. Tanya Matthews, about IAAM's big announcement. You want to know what the big announcement is, folks? The museum is opening in January 2023, God willing.
Yep.
Let's
I
bring
think
Dr.
we are
Matthews
still
back.
bubbling just a little
Are we still bubbling?
bit.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Wait a minute, Doc. I can't hear you now at all. Did you mute?
Right. Yeah. So we muted to try to think about how we would get through that. I have like a mic and a camera and sort of all this kind of stuff going.
You got all the type of equipment.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to try to get through this. Right? And I just ask our audience to please bear with us as we work through this, because I don't want your time to not be well spent with us, because this is a major announcement. I wanted to make sure that all of our watchers, the Black Star Network family, understand how significant this really is. And God willing, Dr. Matthews, we're going to have some conversations offline. I'm trying to get to South Carolina. Yes. That's all I'm saying. I'm trying to get down to Charleston. I'm trying to get to IAAM. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yes.
So we're going to work out on the technical side, but explain to us, what are some of the big things that we should know, like in terms of supporting, 6 months, it may seem far off from right now, but we just went through a 2.5-year pandemic. We're going through all of these changes. So 6 months sounds like a drop of the bucket. It will be here before you know it. So how do we get prepared for this major opening? Because this is a huge institution, especially in the light that this is a part of the Smithsonian Network. First and foremost, Doc, talk to us about why that is important for this to be a Smithsonian museum and not just kind of working on its own.
So a little point of clarification there. So we are collaborators with the Smithsonian.
Okay,
so we have
collaborators.
Borrowed objects with them.
Gotcha.
Dr. Lonnie Bunch was one of our major advisors in the beginning. And I think as we progress, we're going to have some more shared exhibits. I will not tell you now, but I happen to know for a fact we will be hosting one of their exhibitions within our first 5 years. So
wow.
Y'all did not hear that from me. Just scrub that part from YouTube. Just take it out, because I didn't spill on that.
Right.
And so when we say this is an amazing moment to finally be opening, we have been working towards this for 22 years. That's how long it's taken to get this museum off the ground. I have been gifted with the opportunity to help carry us through this last phase. But there have been a lot of folks behind the scenes since 2000, trying to make this happen. So these last 6 months are critical. Pro tip, become a charter member if you want a chance of getting tickets for opening weekend.
Right,
so
right.
We are excited to about to have this problem. Right, we're already getting indications that folks really, really want to be there for our opening weekend, our opening week, and see us. And our charter members are those who believed in us enough to become a member of the museum before we were even able to open the doors. And so, we definitely want to honor that trust and faith in us. And so that's pro tip number one. go to the website and
Right.
become a charter member. But I think also to some of the conversations that you often have on your show, numbers do matter. Showing up matters. Voting matters. If it didn't, there wouldn't be so much going on to stop all of that, right? To reduce all of that. And so when a museum like the International African American Museum can say, we've got 20,000 members, we've got 22,000 members, it says something about what we as a nation want to be talking about, want to be working through. I mean, we need spaces. I no longer think in terms of safe spaces. I think of spaces of courageous curiosity, right? Courageous curiosity. And so we're that kind of space. And so becoming a charter member also helps to declare that. And there are all kinds of levels folks can think through. The second thing is, we do have our social media feeds. If we say something you like that you're really interested in, please put it out there. Please listen. Some of y'all out there got more followers than some heads of global kingdoms. Okay, if y'all could help a sister out, okay,
right,
just a little bit, and so when you see something, shout something. Right, so that's the space that we're in as you're looking at pictures or hearing the stories that we're going to tell. Go ahead, take the shot, tag us. If anybody does happen to be coming through the Charleston area, if you're coming past the Low Country, we're still under construction and we've got the fences, but it's kind of exciting. Just now the little cranes or pieces of, I kid you not, 100-year-old pecan trees just sort of stacked up, waiting to be built into our exhibit space. Snap a picture. Shout out. I was here when. So I think those are big things. And then the last thing I would say for those who are truly bold is to understand, how some of the bigger conversations. The museum is not only here to help with those bigger conversations, but we are also impacted by them. I think we're getting a lot of questions about how do you relate to what's going on in the education system? Well, remember that when we start banning books, we are trying to ban conversation. We're trying to ban stories. And we get really close to making it illegal to go to museums, which, okay, I know that my country has a lot of growing to do. But, we are now the country to go to when you think about modern museums, interaction, ways to tell stories. We need to retain leadership in that space. We really are, as a community, among some of the best museums in the world. And when we start stripping away the ability to do that, me personally, I've never been a fan of being number two at anything. So I would like for us to sort of
me neither, Doc. Me neither. Right.
Yeah.
No, this is beautiful. All right. So one of the big questions is in terms of the physical structure and layout of the museum. And Keena, if we can go back to that video, because this, I just love this video. That's why we keep playing it. I love it because it feels.
So I feel. You see, we're on these pillars because of the space we're on. We consider it hallowed ground. It's the site of former slave trading port, Gadsden's Wharf, one of the nation's most prolific international slave trading ports. They say between 45 and 55% of Africans who were brought to this country would have come to this very spot or to our neighboring spots that are right with us. Now you're kind of rolling through the gallery space, which looks plain only because we're trying to give you a hint. We're not giving it all away right now.
No, don't do that.
So you have just, gone through. So we have nine galleries, core galleries, plus a changing exhibition gallery. And of course, we also have the Center for Family History, which is our genealogy library, which we know is already very popular because we've got some online elements that folks can engage with. So we're trying to get ready to welcome people into the space. Then now you're panning through our outdoor space, kind of a garden within gardens design. So we've got art installations. We've got an ethnobotanical garden. We've also got, performance, engagement, gathering, community space. Y'all know me. There will be drums. There will be drums. Yeah, there will be drums. Yeah.
So and talk to us a little bit about some people saying they're having a space for those who are disabled, so those who may not be able to move around as freely as others. This is a question from our watchers, Taylor, emphasized by Karen, and I see so many people, Mike, V, everybody's like, what about the disabled? How will they be able to access the museum?
Listen, I love that folks are shouting out our differently abled folks, because usually it's an afterthought, but it hasn't been an afterthought for us. It is one of the advantages of being a modern building, right? And so we have considered that, we've thought through that. The garden space themselves, boom, done, easy. That is a flat space, accessible from both the north and the south. So we've got that. Of course, we have an elevator to get folks inside the building. And you may have actually picked up from the digital video that we're actually a very long structure. So our exhibition space is actually all on a single floor. Right, so that's where all of that space is coming in. And so once you get inside, there are no additional steps or stairways to take. And we have monitored our corners. You will be able to get those strollers, the walkers, the chairs, all that around the corners. Well, technically speaking, if 100,000 people show up at 10 a.m. on January 20th, folks gonna have to throw a couple elbows, even from their chairs, kind of in that space. But what we've thought about that, we've also thought through things like closed captioning for all of our videos. And now we're in the space where we're also thinking in the other direction. I don't know, some of you may remember, but one of my sisters is also in education, and her specialty is in autism. And so I've also been in that space where we talk about having low sensory impact spaces and places. And I think once we're up and running, we'll think about devoting, entire portions of a day kind of in that space. I think our community has gotten adjusted to things like that. When we had those times when we particularly allowed our elders to come out, go grocery shopping, sort of during the pandemic and things like that.
Yep.
There are things that institutions like a museum can also learn from that and adopt. And so we're also going to be thinking about how to incorporate that as well.
That's awesome to hear, Doc. That is really awesome. We got a couple of moments left, but I want to get your take on the fact that, this is an international African-American museum. Some of the other questions around that came from our watchers are saying, how far back in the history, how much of the history will be exhibited at this museum. Not giving us any you don't have to break it all down and tell us every element of it.
Yeah.
But Black people in America, we already have a vast history. Now, when you're talking about it from an international space, international context, it's like overwhelming. So how will the museum approach this big topic of international African American history?
Well, I love that question in particular. And I can always depend on folks who are really into the culture to ask that question. Even though we are honored to have this special space, right? Gadsden's Wharf, this major space that was the site of the international slave trade, we are very clear that we are here to tell the untold stories of the African-American journey. And in understanding that, we understand that slavery is not the entire story. It is neither the beginning nor the end of the African-American journey. It's in the middle. And so we do go all the way back to about 13th, 14th century and try to get up as close to modern times as we can. Now, to be clear, because I know I'm going to get this when folks come in the room, there is no one building, clearly no one gallery, right, that can encompass the entire history of African Americans, let alone African peoples and the African diaspora. And so that's not what we are attempting to do. We are attempting to telegraph enough so that every visitor understands how much more there is to that story. So we've got our African Roots and Routes Gallery. We've got our Atlantic Worlds Gallery. Both of those dip into those spaces, talking about civilizations and communities that were there before. And then we also have, which we're very proud of, the Gullah Geechee Gallery. So for those who don't know, the Gullah Geechee are a community, a large and now dispersed community of African Americans who have extraordinary ties back to the culture and the ways of the continent. There are reasons for that. It had to do with the way slavery and plantations were organized, sort of here in the Southeast space. And so we talk a bit about that. So we don't just talk about African influence as if it was just before slavery either. We also help folks see those threads in modern cultures and cultures that gave rise to who we are today. And I'm excited to be forming some partnerships too. We just had a delegation from Ghana visit. Charleston is like near cousin to Barbados. And so thinking about those kinds of relationships, I want for us to also be able to talk about modern relationships to the diaspora, where we, not just where we came from, but where we are now, and where we might want to go on a trip with the museum. I'm just saying.
Oh my gosh. I love it all. I'm loving it all. Dr. Matthews, I mean, this is, and I'm looking at the website, and Keenan, let's post the website once again, please, brother.
Please.
So people can, that way we can let folks know. Again, folks, we're talking about the International African American Museum, IAA Museum.org. That's IAA Museum.org. And when you go on there, it's just so many things you can just gain from this website. Just to give you a little teaser, it's like a little teaser of a trailer of what you can expect once the museum opens in early 2023, God willing, that this museum is going to open. And just looking at so many elements of not just our history. I mean, last time you talked about this, and I think this is absolutely cool. Genealogy, having a place for you to find out what your genealogy is right in the museum. I mean, it's a perfect place. You can just find that out right there. You read about greatness, and then you learn that you are connected to greatness.
That you are connected to it. Right, you find your own untold stories. So that's the Center for Family History. And we are a genealogy library. So before folks show up expecting Henry Louis Gates to sit them at a table, right, and have already done all the work, we are a genealogy library. So we have research assistants and genealogists on staff. And just like a library, we point you in the right direction. We're connected to the largest genealogical databases in the world. We've got some expertise on how to sort of peek behind some curtains when you get stuck. And we also will have some trainings on how to listen differently. I think since the last time we talked, I have been working with my family genealogy, having conversations with my mother, and my mother swore she had met her grandfather. And I kept telling her, well, no, the death records say, he died before then. And, I am fully established, but we all got a little suspicion of the establishment. I'm like, okay, maybe the record's not quite right. But we kept digging and we kept listening with an open ear. And what we discovered is that her great-great-grandfather outlived his son. And that's who my mommy knew. My mommy actually knew her great, but she was so young. It's an old man. She just calls him granddaddy. And it turns out that part of the way that happened is he lived to be 106. So he didn't die till 1956, but that means that he was born in 1850. And so that means that, my mother remembers her great-great-grandfather who was born in the time of slavery, right?
That is powerful.
It's just not that far. It's just not that far behind us. But I would say for us, that became a center of joy, right? Because we had started to trace back to a time where it used to be thought that Black folks couldn't get past 1870 because the census didn't start recording us by name until 1870. So as sensitive as the stories that are going to come out are, there's just so much joy in having a name and having a connection and just being able to keep reaching back like that.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm here for all of it. You know that. Black Star Network, the culture, we're here for all of it.
Yes.
Because we a lot of these conversations, as you know, Doc, a lot of these conversations are, require us and compel us to look into the past, right? Because we're unfortunately in this vicious cycle of history where we just haven't learned the lessons, and so we're doomed to repeat some of the same issues that we've been going through for many, many years in this country. So I love the fact that there is a place and a space for that. Again, folks, the International African American Museum, the big announcement, they will be open in early 2023. Dr. Matthews is saying January of 2023, at the tail end of the Dr. Martin Luther King holiday weekend. What a great time to make a move down to South Carolina when it's cold in some areas and might be a little bit warmer down there. So this is going to be handicapped. The space is going to be, accommodating all of our disabled brothers and sisters that are coming in. And I think one of the big questions is, Doc, you said it at the beginning, but I want to reiterate this. How can people get involved? How can they get their name on the list? What do they need to do? I think we lost it a little bit. All right, we're going to try to get her back. Let me just pull up again, folks. I'm looking at, and if you haven't had a chance, take a look at the website, IAAmuseum.org. IAAmuseum.org. My recommendation, let's all become members. Let's all become members. Let's all make sure that we have our membership, that we're adding to this museum, that we're making our contribution. It's a small donation, small membership fee, but we're adding to this museum. I think this is very exciting. Let me just get a couple of comments. I want to get a couple of comments from our watchers as people are checking in on this. Sonia checked in and said, I'm on the mailing list and get their newsletter after she came on the last time. Awesome. Thank you, Sonia. Sonia Jenkins checking in. Let me see. Brother King Lee said, I am focusing strictly on my family here on the culture. Thank you, Brother King Lee. Always appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. Let me see something here. Oh, Dr. Mordecai Cassius Marcellus Jones checked in. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is walking in his water pedestrian shoes and trumping on sinners like grapes in a wine press. His truth is marching on. Amen. Amen. Nisa 1971 checked in and said, Farajii, yes, done. We are definitely contributing. That's awesome. That is awesome. Let me make sure I'm saying this. Salamatu Moray said, if I'm able to get funding, I would love to take my students. Great student trip. Great student trip here. Great student trip. And I think that is one of the big things that we can kind of check in with. The fact is, this is history. This is history in the making. So we have an opportunity to add to making sure that this institution is built well. We also have an opportunity to support this, making a trip there. Great summer vacation trip. You know, I remember when the Smithsonian Museum the Smithsonian Museum of African American History, when that first opened up in DC, you couldn't buy a ticket to get in. It was crazy. Now things have kind of like died down. A lot of people have seen it, but it's still a fantastic display of our history and our impact on America. I foresee this being the same thing, folks, that people are going to be checking in, and guess what? Folks are going to be checking in. A lot of people from around the country are going to want to be at the museum. So make sure that you put your face in a place. But that was the IAAM's big announcement there. Again, the museum will be opening in 2023, January 2023. And we are very, very excited. And trust and believe, God willing, the Culture Black Star Network will be present for that grand opening. I know Dr. Matthews had a little technical issues. We'll be sure to bring her back on to share with us any other information, any other details that we need to know. But that's the big that's the big announcement today. We're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's talk about some trending topics and some other things that are happening that you may not be aware of. So I'm going to break it down to you. And we're going to check in with Culture crew member Nira Muhammad and so much more. So stay with us. It's The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
These are the only bins that will accommodate larger overboard.
They put 10 in here?
10, and you don't come out till you die. And you eat him, you hoop him.
Oh my God.
Welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful. New unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
there are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience as we fight these interlocking injustices together.
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third Reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Let me just say this: we've been running that promo of the Moral March on Washington. I can't emphasize enough how much love and respect I have for the Poor People's Campaign and Reverend William Barber for the great work that he continues to do. And you know, if you got any young people out there, especially, you know, some young people that are looking to kind of get their experience in social justice work, and if you're able to make that move to DC, I would highly recommend that you take them to that March on Washington. Phenomenal event, and I'm saying that from just seeing how they have done that event across the country. But it is an eye-opening experience when you're in a space with people who think so progressively and who have a different vision for what this country can look like. And I mean, just across the board, Native Americans, Black folks, white folks, you got all these different people coming together. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing under the banner of making moral decisions, sensible decisions that are respective of people's gender, people's religion, and all of the differences that we bring to the table. How that is all just kind of kept in mind, but it doesn't become a building block for the progress that we're trying to make. So I just had to get that off my heart because I'm inspired. I'm inspired by what I see from the Poor People's Campaign and the March. And of course, that comes from the great work of Dr. Martin Luther King. So if you haven't had a chance to, go to a march recently, this is not like one of those just chanting. And I've been to a lot of marches, folks. This is a whole different spirit, different energy. This is a whole different America. And I know some of us may feel like we are just bitter and angry with America as it is. Go to one of these march, go to this march, and you will see different side of this country that a lot of people don't know exists. It's a beautiful, beautiful experience. But I wanted to just throw that out there. I wanted to talk about some of the other big conversations that people are having, trending conversations. One of them is this whole situation with D.L. Hughley and Monique, the comedians, and how Monique is back in hot water again. But I have to say, folks, now, she's had her things with Netflix and Oprah and Lee Daniels and Tyler Perry. And since she has reconciled her differences with Lee Daniels. I don't know if she's reconciled it. Y'all can tell me if she's reconciled it with Oprah or Tyler Perry. But she's moved on. She's getting roles. She's becoming much more seen. She was kind of like blackballed for a long time. But now she's having this issue with DL Hughley. Apparently, they were supposed to be. There was a big comedy festival that happened over the weekend, and one of the things that she had a difference with DL about was who was going to be the headliner of the show. Okay, you got two powerhouse comedians, two nationally known comedians, two comedians that can hold their own, obviously. But in this case, DL thought that he was the headliner show based upon a deal memo that he received from the promoters and from the producers of the show. Whereas Monique said, that's a deal memo. I have a contract. I have a contract, a signed, sealed, delivered contract about being the headliner for the show. And as a result of that, they went back and forth on Instagram and all of those things. And it showed that, hey, DL had a couple of receipts, but I think Monique had a lot of receipts. I want to bring in Culture Crew member very quickly, Nira Muhammad, who is a writer, who is an educator, and she's an advocate and activist. Let's bring in Nira. Nira, hey, how are you? Hey. I'm good. All right, real quick, DL, Monique. I hate to say versus because this is not a battle because there's still two powerful Black comedians. I don't know what's going on with comedians over these past couple of weeks, but
I don't know.
But both,
nothing's funny anymore. I guess nothing's funny anymore.
Nothing's funny anymore.
Nothing's funny anymore.
But I thought that the back and forth, and I mean, it's DL Hughley. You're going to expect him to kind of do his thing on social media, take some chop. But I really thought that Monique, coming out of the space she's coming from, where she was kind of blackballed for a while, and then now she's kind of getting these big gigs again. Mm-hmm. She really proved herself. I don't know about, and I've read the IG comments and the posts, but it still shows. And she said something. I think that this is the thing that got me the most. She said this, and she's always been an advocate of making sure women have a voice.
Yeah.
And making sure Black women in particular, that's been her thing with Netflix. That's always seems to be her thing, right? Mm-hmm. But she made a point to say to DL that it's sad that I still have to show you my worth as a Black woman to you as a Black man. And I agree. It's sad. You know, I mean,
I don't understand what why was there so much confusion? Why was there so much back and forth? Why does it even matter, whether or not she's a headliner or not to DL? Like, why is he fighting her on this? Like, if she has this contract that says that she is the headliner for the show, why couldn't he gracefully been like, oh, my bad, and like bowed out? You know what I mean? Like, why keep going on and on about it and making it this big social media thing? It's just like, who are we doing this for? What are we doing this for? How is this really any different, I guess, in the Will Smith situation? Like, maybe he's not physically hitting her, but it's it's degrading and it's demeaning. And it's why are we even going through this? Why couldn't you just made this into a joke and we all moved on? And I'm sure you're going to get the same paycheck, whether your name is the headlining name or not. So,
well, you might not.
I mean, I'm just saying, if there's already a contract out there, is what I'm saying. Then your pay is now your pay. That should have already been negotiated at this point. So it's just whether or not you're the headliner at this moment doesn't matter based upon how much you're making.
Well, I mean, let's keep it real. DL Hughley has made a good amount of money, right? Yeah. So he's been doing this for a long time. Monique has made some money, right? I think it's just about respect. For DL, it's hey, I'm the guy. I'm still out there. I didn't have an issue with all of these power, these big feet, big people like Oprah. I'm the guy. And Monique is no, not anymore. I'm coming back into this thing. Yes, I had my issues, but I'm I've paved the way. I've paid my dues. And it's I hope my only hope and concern about this is that it doesn't become a situation where they're just okay, they can disagree on this, but they can still respect each other.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think it's just really silly to me. It's like you guys are both two comedians. You both have a gig. Your career is still obviously going on. You know, DL has had his share of, issues in media. She's had her share of issues. Who cares? It's a new day. It is a new year. Move on. Everyone needs to move on at this point and just get your bag, make people laugh, and move on to the next gig. That's it.
That's all it is about, right? Getting the bag.
I mean, if that's what your passion is, are you not both sharing that stage? You know what I mean? Like, how many other comedians wish that they were on that same stage? And y'all arguing about whose name is bigger on the marquee out front, when other people are wishing that they could even get their name on the marquee.
I think that's like the unspoken point of this, right? Like sometimes, and this is the thing people always say to me, and I'm sure you've gotten this type of comment. People say, "Oh, I see you on TV. I hear you on the radio. Oh my gosh, but you seem so down to earth." And it's like, well, I thank God for blessing us to be in a humble space. But more importantly, it's like you do recognize that there are other people who wish they had the opportunity to do what we do, what we love to do, what I love to do each and every day. Somebody is always like, oh my gosh, I wish I can do it. Now, if I came on this space or this platform and just like, man, that's messed up. You know what I mean? They got me under Roland Martin. I'm the new one and next. And I'm not saying that that's happening, folks. Trust and believe. Roland Martin is the guy of Black Star Network, but he's created a place for all of us to learn, to earn and to grow in the same thing. So, I mean, it's like sometimes you just lose, you forget that there are other people. You know what I mean? And I think and I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like that's one of the lessons that we can take from this. It's not just two comedians.
People are struggling from inflation. People are struggling in general from.
You gotta be happy somebody want to pay them damn tickets.
Right. I mean, you gotta just like, at this point, it's like, man, I guess those of us who are the little people, we're just looking like, listen, shut up. Like, this is just silly at this point. Just go make your damn millions and just be quiet. Like, whatever.
Right.
Whatever.
Right.
I'm trying to make ends meet and figure out how I'm gonna pay my rent. Or even afford rent and the new gas prices. I gotta like figure out how I'm even gonna put gas in my car to get to work, and you're worried about how big your name is on the marquee. I don't have time for it.
Don't have time for it. All right, here's another thing. This is a trending topic. A woman made a post on Twitter saying that she could be a great wife because she made this great plate. Keenan, can you pull up the plate?
Oh gosh, yes.
I'm gonna be a wife one day because I'll be cooking. Look at the food, Joe.
Yep.
Who's she cooking for? Who's doing the cooking? Who's doing the cooking? Sis, that's Popeyes. Stop, take it. Look, first thing. All right, so this is totally wrong. I mean, and then you and I've actually had conversations like this about stuff like this. First and foremost, I don't care if it's Popeyes. Okay, fine. Give Popeyes his credit. What you could do, why Janelle say everything is brown on the plate? Everything is brown. That's true. Your place should not, right? Like your place should be having some colors on it, some green, some orange, some yellow.
There's no vegetables there. There are no vegetables on the plate.
Everything starch. It's like people, you know, at Thanksgiving, they'd be like, I'm gonna get a plate. And they'd be like mac and cheese and potatoes.
Yeah, like, you gotta, she's stocking up. She got her beans, her meat. She on a protein tip.
Right. Janae said exactly for who and who cares, because she clearly still single. You know why she's still single? Because you're serving the food on a paper plate.
You know, that's a forever. debate I see
Keenan,
on,
show that plate
on
again,
social
brother.
media.
Keenan, show the plate again, please, brother. Show this plate.
No, I see the plate.
Why do people put food on a paper plate?
Because they don't want to wash dishes, Farajii. That's why. I'm trying not to be judgmental over here, but no, I'm not a paper plate user myself.
Like, you don't own plates in your home? No, and I've seen this. This is not the first time. You and I have actually had this
a big
conversation.
debate. Like, I still see this as like a conversation on Instagram and Facebook where people are still having this debate about, do you serve your man his plate on paper plates? And most guys are like, I don't care. I just want the food. Most women are like, whatever, you're going to take this food no matter what kind of plate I serve it to you on. Some people are like, who's serving that man? He can make his own plate. So you got all these levels.
No, ain't no levels.
These are the very conversations.
No, why can't you just use a regular plate?
They don't want to wash dishes.
You know what the paper plate means to me? I'm only going to be here temporarily.
Oh.
That's what it means to me. It means to me like, oh, okay, you here for the night. This is your to-go plate.
Your cookout.
This is your to-go plate. After tonight, have a nice night, sir.
Oh, you don't get the fine china.
You don't even. You get a paper plate and a bottle of soda. Have a good night, sir.
I don't do about. I do with a can.
Great times.
Can.
No
glass.
Stop putting your food on a paper plate, folks. All right. One more thing before we wrap up today. Hey, Keenan, let's show this class of these dynamic black men. This is a class. I don't know if we have that picture. We got that picture.
I know what you're talking about.
So there was an entire graduating high school class that was accepted into college. Every graduating senior. We're going to show this in a moment.
The all black boys.
St. Augustine High School was accepted to college. Every black boy. And check this out, folks. The class also earned a combined $9.2 million in scholarship offers.
Amazing.
Let me show you. A class of all black boys, all going to college, and they all got scholarships.
Yeah.
99 graduates of the class, man. I just had to, and you're an educator. How big is that? When we see these, and this is graduation and proms, and we got to have a conversation about proms. Oh my God, we got to have a conversation about proms.
I'm going to show my age if we have a conversation about prom.
I don't care, but we have to have a conversation about prom culture because these proms now make my prom look like
cheesy.
Look like a third grade play date. You know what I'm saying? All right, let's go back to these young brothers that are doing. Look at this. Ty, look at it. This is just all black men. Every one of them, 99 graduates, going to be going to college from St. Augustine. I love it, man.
I love it. And I love that they're awarded so much in scholarships because, when I think of college now, unfortunately, I don't like to think of like the debt that you take on when you go to college and then like the job market after you get out of college. But just to see that they all have like received some sort of scholarship, I think that's a really beautiful thing. And just the fact that looking at Black excellence, looking at Black boys, I hope this is like one of those stories that people share with their sons and even their daughters because it needs to be shared. It's just such a beautiful thing. It's just like Black excellence at its finest. Like that, if we're like, what is Black excellence? To me, that's it.
That's it.
Because it's not just about, oh, you went to high school. It's about excelling because everybody goes to high school. It's about you making the decision to choose to excel when there's so many other people now who make so many other decisions not to. Absolutely. There's so many forces against our children, especially our Black boys, about, the coolness of being smart or being hardworking or being a scholar. You know what I mean? So to see that, I think that's something that we really have to highlight, and we need to really this is. I'm glad that you brought this up because they deserve it.
Yeah, again, if you can find the whole picture,
I know the one like them standing there, the whole class
standing there. If you can find that, King Keenan, that would be great. But you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I want us to start, and I don't know if any of our watchers have promoted this narrative, but there are more black men in college than there are in prison.
Yeah.
Y'all know that, right? Like there are more black men in college than there are in prison. I've heard the opposite.
I'm so happy, like, to hear stories like this, just because we hear so many negative stories all the time. Like, just to take a moment to highlight positive moments and like positive things, like that's powerful.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Farajii, with your
So
baby self.
Yes. I'm a Black king, damn it. But I just want to do a hey, Keenan, let me know when you got that pick. I wanted to end the show on a high note with some positivity and some smiling, beautiful black faces. And you know, again, here they are. Here's it. There you go.
It's so, and I love the colors too. I mean, just like that purple and gold, that is like royalty right there. I love it. That is a royal color. That's dope.
Salute the young kings right there. We salute the young king. Look at that. You can tell they're proud too, boy. Like the brothers down front, they holding it. They like,
look how they're standing there, posture, everything. I just love it. It's powerful.
Oh man, love it, love it, love it. All right, salute to all the young kings of St. Augustine. Thank you so much for doing the great work and being so good for the culture. Nira Muhammad, we know that you are getting ready for your next season of your podcast,
Queen Talks,
with Nira Muhammad. That's going to be dropping very soon. I think you told me July. Is that still on track for dropping the third season?
I've been like, planning moves. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm always excited. Yeah. I think season 2 is really dope. So if you haven't had a chance to check out season 2, you should check it out because it's fire. I love listening to it personally. Yeah, it's pretty dope. I'm on that Ghosted episode right now because that's how I'm feeling right now. Okay. That's my highlight, my episode highlight of the week.
We don't have 2 hours to talk about the pains and tragedies of life of black women of being ghosted. We'll have that conversation later on. Nira Muhammad, who is an artist, writer, and host of Queen Talks with Nira. You can find that on all platforms where podcasters are streaming. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being on the show for a few moments. And more importantly, thank you for being so good for the culture.
Always. Love you, Farajii.
Love you too. All right, folks. That's going to do it for us. I thank each and every one of you. Fantastic show today. Talking a little bit about the culture. Make sure y'all support us at blackstarnetwork.com, where we continue to put out content that is just for you, that is unadulterated, unfiltered, and certainly unapologetically black. And of course, we want to have the conversations like no other. So we are always looking for your support. And of course, even if you can't support us financially, you can let your family and friends know to download the app, to download it on your TV, your smart tablet, your smartphone, anything that you have a device, download it for free. And guess what? You'll be connected to Black-owned media like never before, and it can all be found at blackstarnetwork.com. Take a look at that. Oh, we got shows upon shows now, folks. We got shows upon shows. We've been rocking and rolling here at Black Star. So make sure y'all check us out. All right, folks, that's going to do it for me. I want to thank my dynamic team, Joel, Shannon, and my man King Keenan for making us do sound and look so good. And I thank each and every one of you for being a part of the conversation. Oh, my goodness. I love what you have to say, the comments, everything. We appreciate it. I love it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, stay tuned. Up next at the 6 o'clock hour is Brother Roland Martin with Roland Martin Unfiltered. Make sure y'all tune into that. And again, to get the latest around the big breaking news around Peyton Gendron and the charges that were placed against him for domestic terrorism, hate charges, and 10 counts of first-degree murder for his slaughter of our people in Buffalo, New York. man, oh man, I hope these charges stick, folks, because we need some justice like yesterday. So stay tuned for that conversation and a whole lot more on Roland Martin Unfiltered. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Peace.